So I wanted to record this on video so that if you ever wanted to hear the article again, you could just call it up on YouTube and there's the article. So who knows if it's going to get published or when it's going to get published, but this is what I sent. And it's called Lady Joan, A Labor of Love. Are you going to read it? I'll read it to you.
Okay, I want to see what the labor is.
Lady Joan, A Labor of Love. After his retirement from civil service, Gary Herbertson built and restored wooden boats, kayaks, canoes, rowboats, and sailing dinghies. 17 of them. Each time he set up the sawhorses in the backyard of their Berkeley, California home to start working on the next hull, his wife Joan would joke, "So is this one the Lady Joan?" At their 60th wedding anniversary celebration in 2015, standing before 50 friends and family, Gary announced the construction of his next boat, the largest project he had ever taken on, his magnum opus. He unveiled a poster showing a gaff rig cutter with the words Lady Joan printed on the hull in gold letters. Joan burst into speechless tears at this unique declaration of love. The selection of the specific design was the result of a half-year investigation as to which boat would best meet their needs. Gary and his son Basin created a list of 5 design specifications for the boat. First, it had to handle the normal sailing conditions of the San Francisco Bay, which has a unique weather pattern during the sailing season. Due to its location between the cold Pacific Ocean and the hot Central Valley, each summer morning usually has too little wind to sail. Then at midday suddenly develops and sustains 20 to 25 knots of wind. Normal sailing conditions on the San Francisco Bay would be considered a small craft advisory in many other places. So the boat needed a low center of effort in the sails and lots of ways to shorten sail. This suggested a gaff cutter rig, which sailors have used for centuries to safely manage a wide range of conditions. Second, the boat needed to be small enough to launch from a trailer to make it easy to explore lots of different bodies of water. Part of the fun of a sailboat is gunk holing in new places, and California has lots of interesting lakes and bays to sail. The ability to use launch ramps would also avoid the cost of a crane each year for both hauling out and putting in. Additionally, being able to overwinter in a driveway at home rather than at a boatyard affords additional cost savings. This all suggested a shallow draft centerboarder that was not too heavy to tow behind a standard pickup truck. Third, the boat needed to be large enough to comfortably sleep 2 at anchor. While day sailing is great fun in itself, this boat would be used for spending a night or 2 aboard. There's something special about falling asleep to the sound of wavelets lapping against the bow while the boat gently rocks and bobs. Cradling that first cup of hot coffee while watching the dawn lighting the water is an exquisite pleasure. This is every bit as much a part of the experience of sailing as securing the leeward jib sheet after coming about. So the boat needed to be big enough to hold a wide bed for a husband and wife to snuggle. Fourth, Gary and Basin were going to build this boat, so it needed to be a construction technique that they could manage. Carvel planking and caulking seemed out of reach for their skill set. Gary had a lot of experience with stitch and glue plywood construction, so they primarily investigated plywood lapstrake designs. Fortunately, a lot of plans for home boat builders use that technique. Fifth, and finally, they wanted a boat that would be enchanting to behold. Sure, sailing involves hoisting and trimming sails, navigation, and anchoring. But a large part of the pleasure of sailing is resting your eyes upon the boat in quiet moments, catching sight of the boat in the marina and eagerly greeting it for another weekend sail, sitting in the cockpit at sunset and scanning the deck fittings or the rigging, securing the mooring lines once back in the slip, locking the companionway door, and walking away down the dock, only to turn around and linger in a parting look at the boat, grateful for another pleasant outing. The boat needed to be something that brought delight to the eyes, something special, something evocative, something compelling. This was the most intangible of the criteria, but also one of the most important. Gary and Basin referred to this set of specifications as a trailerable bay cruiser. After looking at scores of designs, they realized that their category of boats is frequently called a pocket cruiser. When they whittled down to the final 4 prospects, they built scale cardboard models so that they compare them directly to one another in 3 dimensions. Every design is a set of compromises, each optimizing for criteria that pull in different directions. However, one boat kept landing in the center of their design specifications. The boat that Gary unveiled at the anniversary party was the Cape Cutter 19. Originally designed by Dudley Dix to be commercially built as a fiberglass production boat, the 19-foot length-on-deck hull and 19-foot mast would fit inside a standard 20-foot shipping container to be delivered around the world. Dix received requests from home builders for a plywood version, so in 2000 he drafted plans for a lapstrake plywood hull. He designed internal plywood bulkheads to hold full-length stringers for attaching lapped plywood planks. 800 pounds of ballast and a wide beam of 7 foot 3 inches give her the stability required for her choppy home waters. 307 square feet of sail in this gaff cutter rig keep the sail plan low and easily shortened in the powerful breezes typical of a San Francisco Bay summer afternoon. Drawing only 18 inches with her centerboard up, she can poke into the shallow waters of the bay and nose up onto a trailer to ply other bays or lakes. The cabin, necessarily small on a 23-foot, 8-inch length overall boat, creates sitting headroom through a subtly raised deck. The cockpit is generous and social. The traditional gaff rig and wood mast have the inevitable quality of looking just right. Sailboats have always been a part of Gary and Joan's lives together. In the late 1950s, they took their young children sailing in their Lido 14 on the San Francisco Bay. When they were stationed in Virginia on the Potomac River, they sailed a 15-foot albacore in an evening race series. Wanting more time on the water, they purchased a Pearson Ariel 26, which they brought down the Intracoastal Waterway when they were transferred to Miami. Upon retirement in 1984, they sold their home, car, and furniture and purchased a Morgan Out Island 41, which they migrated from New England to the Bahamas, following the sailing seasons for a couple of years. Herbertson family reunions have included bareboating in the Virgin Islands, canal boating through rural England, and houseboating on Lake Powell. The Herbertsons are a rare family that define a good time as gathering lots of people into crowded quarters for extended periods. Gary starts each trip with a family meeting in which he lays down the law. On this trip, we have one rule. If you fall in the water, you have to get wet. Early in his retirement, Gary, with his son Basin, took several wooden boat school classes. With that courage, they built a Phil Bolger design Gypsy. This 15-foot, 4.5-inch sailing dinghy is discussed in Dynamite Payson's book, Instant Boats, describing how to build plywood boats with tack and tape construction. Aboard this boat, named Many Blessings, Bason's children grew up learning to row and sail, thus passing on the family nautical legacy. Many Blessings launched Gary into a boat-building obsession for decades to follow. Gary would build a boat and then yet another boat, launch it, paddle around a few times, then give it away to one of his 4 children or 18 grandchildren. Then he'd start working on the next hull. His fun was the daily fiddling on the next step rather than adding another boat to his armada. When someone asked him when a given boat would be completed, he'd feign a startled look and respond, "What? Finish it? That would ruin it as a backyard project." Gary and Basin became project buddies for the 5-year construction of the Lady Joan. Besides mixing a lot of epoxy to hold the hull together, the labor proved to be bonding for their father-son relationship as well. Mm-hmm. One of the catchphrases of the project was, "Two heads keep being better than one." Joan kept the crew fed, including the many grandchildren and other family members who showed up to lend a hand. She worked in her flower garden by the boat and would gaze over to appreciate the most recent progress. Occasionally, Joan and Bason's wife, Lise, would roll up their sleeves and apply some epoxy or paint. Basin and Lise conducted their wedding ceremony in the backyard with the hull under construction. Gary kept a log of construction hours, but only sawdust hours counted, not the countless hours he and Basin spent standing by the hull, admiring the form taking shape, or strategizing the upcoming work sequence, or brainstorming design modifications. The two of them helped mill Douglas fir for the stringers, scantlings, and bowsprit on a buddy's farm up north in Humboldt County. 9mm Hydrotex plywood was used to build the bulkheads, planks, decks, and cockpit. All plywood cutouts were sealed in West System epoxy before bonding into the hull. Plywood planks were clamped and glued onto stringers with filled epoxy, then filleted for strength. 2 years into construction, at 389 hours of sawdust labor, the hull was completed and painted. During a Thanksgiving celebration, a couple dozen family members united to roll her over. This had the startling effect of transforming the assembled pieces of plywood into an astonishingly large boat. She was leveled in her cradle with the waterline plane, true to gravity. She was clearly an able vessel bound for water. While the Herbertsons built the hull exactly as Dix designed, they made several modifications in fitting her out. Perhaps the most significant departure were changes made to the berths. After all, sleeping aboard was a priority. Dix lays out a V berth and 2 quarter berths to sleep 4. However, this boat was being built to sleep 2 comfortably. So Gary and Basin eliminated the quarter berths to increase cockpit storage and slid the V berth aft to make it wider. However, Dix designed a mast support to carry down from the deck to the plywood keelson, and this would go now right through the bed. To solve this, they laminated an oversized deck beam to carry the mast load over a reinforced bulkhead to span an uninterrupted queen-size berth. Rather than commission the construction of a steel plate for the centerboard, the pair built a plywood centerboard filled with 200 pounds of lead ingots sheathed in Dynel, set in epoxy. A favorite workside joke was to solicit an innocent visitor's help by saying, "Could you just pick up that board and set it over here, okay?" Gary and Basin modified the cockpit to increase the amount of storage under the seats and behind the backrests. Also, a hatch from a fisherman's supply catalog opened up space under the cockpit sole to store 2 anchors with their rods. Additional modifications simplified both the cockpit coamings as well as the foredeck. Another decision was to use an electric outboard motor for auxiliary power. Gasoline outboards have been somewhat of a Herbertson family great white whale, failing to start at inopportune times. Besides, the noise of rapid explosions in a metal box aboard a small boat seemed incompatible with the quiet ethos of sailing. So Gary purchased a Torqeedo 1003 CS. The motor well was shaped for that particular motor, and cockpit storage designed to stow the conveniently dismantled shaft, battery, and control arm when under sail. Part of the fun of the project resulted from the decision to fabricate all of the cleats and most of the blocks and fittings at home. This included the gaff and boom jaws, bowsprit heel and gammon, mast tangs, bronze chains plates, and all the oak cleats bolted to the deck and mast. Gary fabricated a reefing B-rail that he saw in WoodenBoat issue 272, January-February 2020. He also did all the splicing on the Dyneema standing rigging and soft shackles. The spars were all built out of fir to Dudley Dix specifications, a hollow bird's mouth mast, and solid boom, gaff, and bowsprit. A poignant urgency was introduced into the build in 2019 when Joan was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. An extended period of chemotherapy and extensive surgery fortunately resulted in her return to a high quality of life. Into this period of recovery barreled the COVID-19 pandemic, a scourge for which gardening and boat building provided some sense of engaged normality. When launching the boat finally rose over the event horizon, work on the boat accelerated. Finishing steps were eagerly checked off a final to-do list, which somehow seemed to keep growing in length rather than shortening. A job site joke became, the final 10% of the work takes 50% of the time. Confounding compound curves modified an often repeated carpenter's phrase into measure 3 times and cut 7. On August 29th, 2020, after 1,035 sawdust hours of labor and $16,800 in materials, the boat was on her trailer at the Berkeley Marina launch ramp. A couple dozen family and friends milled around excitedly, examining the fully rigged vessel and signing the new logbook. The black hull gleamed. The varnished mast was held up by shrouds and stays. The red sails were furled at the ready. Gary cleared his throat and lifted his voice. I'm 86 years old, and building such a large boat felt like an intimidating project for me to take on, perhaps even impossible. Even now, looking at this beautiful boat, a part of me still cannot believe that we built it. What I discovered, however, is that this improbable project is made up of 10,000 little steps, each one of which is actually quite manageable. I also never could have imagined being married for 64 years either. But Joan and I have loved sharing many thousands of days, one at a time, and ended up making this beautiful life together. Reaching out to take his wife's hand, he proclaimed, "We hereby christen Lady Joan." Instead of breaking a champagne bottle, they kissed.
Sweet. Sweet.
Well, it kind of surprises me. I had anticipated that it would be mostly about construction and woodworking, but you've put a lot of life into it. I think you're a good writer.
I think Daddy has been interested in boating his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
It started down at the Berkeley Marina, and it continues to this day.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it continues to this day. I still fantasize about building another boat, and I know I can't do it, but I think about it a lot.
You said that you were looking at boat plans yesterday.
Yes.